Oh, well, thank you so much, Cindy, for being with me today and being in this container of the Bright Holy Womb, this beautiful group of awakening, empowered women warriors here
Mm.
to uh, help support planetary liberation as well as personal sovereignty and embodiment. And I just want to share with the circle that, when I first met you, I still remember the moment, and I was so moved by your level of thoughtfulness and generosity, and how we were in a group of 80 people at Joshua Tree, and that you had brought special this little bird whistle for our daughter Kinty. And to me, it's just like they have 80 people. They've created this seating chart. They've memorized where every single person is sitting, harmonized the group so that all of our medicine could be, the most beautifully amplified, and we could be in that place where we could be of the greatest service. And on top of that, and in all of that, you remembered our sweetheart. And what I've seen from then is just that level of care and devotion, and just deep, like the humanity that you bring to your leadership, and the authenticity is also just such a, in my experience, such a rare, beautiful thing in leadership and in co-leadership with your beloved Don Oscar Mira-Quesada, and also our beloved mentors, as well as you. And so I just wanted to begin this group acknowledging that. Is like, to me, it's like when I'm in doubt in a moment, I am like, okay, how have I, like, how would Cindy and Oscar respond? Like, and that's so amazing to have that mentorship, and also some, really that place to look, not from a disempowered place to look up, but also from a place of like, oh, actually on this journey, like that, those spirals ahead, and to
Mhm.
be able to help chart the course, which is, a pretty intense course, to be in the path of conscious awakening and shamanic initiation into our multidimensional nature. And so it's so amazing for me to have your support in my life, and in Darcy's lives. And also, I feel like, one of the things that has been so significant about your presence in my life, and I feel like our larger global community's life, is, for me, it felt like you and Oscar were able to see Darcy and I
Mm.
in some ways before we could see ourselves, and still I feel like holding that.
Mhm.
And that has been such a grace and a blessing to be able to have like
Mm.
a like the space being held for us
Mhm.
to remember, but also in that to help just have those gentle nudges to like, hey, step up a bit more here, step up a bit more, like, in that way of like, it's time to remember and come forward. And so thank you so much for your
Love it.
friendship, your mentorship in my life, in our lives. From remembering Kinty, and she still has the kitty stuffy that you gave her. That is like, it's a white kitty, so it's kind of dirty now, but she sleeps with it almost every night. And so those are the things that really, to me, really matter and show what's behind kind of sometimes maybe our leadership exterior, is that
Mm.
care. And
Thank you.
stuffies go a long way.
Thank you so much, Robin. Brings tears to my eyes hearing you acknowledge me like that. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, and thank you so much for being willing to be a part of this, this series, and really this exploration and ceremonial journey into, into the reclamation, as well as the remembrance, but also the reconciliation
Mhm.
of our bright holy womb.
Mm.
And this is a really big, this is big work. And that's why I felt like a counsel, and getting perspectives from women, especially mentors in my life,
Mhm.
would be so essential, because it's so profound and it's so fundamental that sometimes it can be a bit scary to even go there. And I see how much easier it is to kind of just like, bypass this piece and just kind of stay up here. But really, as we're dropping in more, it's like into our embodiment and our awakening, our wombs are calling us, and it feels like the great mother's womb is calling us as well.
Most
Um,
definitely.
yeah. And so, I mean, today it's like, I look forward to this conversation just moving in an organic way, but perhaps we could begin just with your feelings and your thoughts now, especially after your decades in divine feminine leadership and in sacred partnership and spiritual leadership. But to see how you feel like, the divine feminine energies are arising now in, through many of us, and then, beginning in a larger mass way, but also, how do we actually be in service to this when it feels like there's actually such a counter energy to it, like it's so threatening, if it's so intimidating to the status quo.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. And I want to acknowledge you as well, because I know that this has been a big step for you to take on this topic of the bright and holy womb. And I know that you are walking with a lot of courage and trust. And I really admire you, and I'm inspired by you, and I just really want to bow deeply to you. And I want you to know that I support you every step of the way in this very important, deep healing work that you've taken on. And I know how difficult it is for you, because I know your past story. And so the fact that you're willing to take this on, not just for yourself, but to hold this container for other women to delve into their womb wounds, and whether these wounds are individual, perhaps wounds from this lifetime through rape or abuse, molestation, or if they're collective wounds that have been passed down through the mother's bloodline.
Yeah.
Addressing both of those is very important for all of us as women. And for you to take on holding this container for all of us really is just a great gift. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah. It's the time.
It's the time.
My womb would not be ignored.
She will not be silenced. So the topic of the divine feminine and divine feminine consciousness and the goddess, and really the matriarchy at large, cannot be separated for me. It's all one large energy, and it is the energy of creation. And for millennia, for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, we were a matriarchal society. And women were the shamans, and women were the drummers, and women were the healers, and the dreamers, and the oracles, and the mothers, and the gatherers. And men also had their place in this matriarchal society that was also respected. And for many years, these societies could go on very peacefully, living very peacefully. And this is where the rituals were born from. This is where the ceremonies were born from. This is where art was born from. This is where calendar making was born from. Calendar making started through women's moon blood. And it was women used marks on sticks to track their moons, and that's how they started tracking time. And culture was created through this divine feminine matriarchal community. And then about 6,000 years ago, with the onset of the first organized religions, the patriarchy started exerting its force. And that was when we really saw the first attempts to take down the matriarchy. And through those first attempts, in addition to taking medicine from us, in addition to taking science from women, in addition to taking law from women, art from women, all the professions now were taken from women. And women were relegated to just having babies, producing a workforce, basically. And since that time, and throughout the last 6,000 years, the best way to control women is to control their womb, to control their reproductive systems, to control them so that we are told when to have children and when not to have children, when we need more workforce, when we need less workforce. It's a way to enslave us, and nothing short of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so through millennia, we as women have tried to fight this. We've tried to take back our sovereignty. And there have been mass murders, there have been the witch hunts, there's been our wombs being governed by law. And what's deeply in my heart today is the possible overturning of Roe versus Wade in the United States. And this is a topic very near and dear to my heart since I've been 16 years old. And so back to your question though, the kind of the larger vision of the divine feminine, through this rise of the patriarchy and putting down the matriarchy, basically it's a matricide, it's the killing off of the matriarchy. It's also been a killing off of nature. Our relationship to nature has been torn apart on a large scale. And now all of us can see what's happening in this world, in this planet, to Pachamama, to our resources, to our relationship with her. And so, as you know, in much of my work for the last 3 decades, it's been dedicated to bringing a shamanic life way back to people, because these women, that our ancestors were shamans and they lived a shamanic life way. And so the return of that shamanic life way is something that I have seen as a way to return the divine feminine consciousness back to this planet. And they go hand in hand to me. A shamanic life way, divine feminine consciousness. They are both earth-based religions, if you will. It's a way of living in total respect with our mother, in total respect with the creatrix. Personally, I feel that this return to a shamanic life way, this return to the empowered divine feminine consciousness, this return to the goddess culture, the matriarchal culture, is the only way we are going to evolve into a humanity that's going to survive. Mm-hmm. This is our hope. This is our salvation. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I've been dedicating myself to. One of the reasons that the womb sovereignty has been so important to me is that at 16, I helped a girlfriend who needed an abortion. Mm-hmm. And, 16 is very young, and we had to get ourselves out of school. We drove a rickety Volkswagen from Michigan to Canada so that she could have this really personal process. Then we drove home and had to then lie to our families, telling them we were in school all day. We had nobody to talk to about this. We had no counseling. We had no spiritual leader. We couldn't talk to anybody but each other. And it had a large effect on both of us. And since that day, it's been an issue very close to my heart, is womb sovereignty, reproductive freedom, sovereignty over my entirety. And it's also, that's another area of life I've been very dedicated to. I have demonstrated, I've donated money, I've spoken at rallies, and will continue to. And as a matter of fact, we'll be at a rally tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah. Well, thank you for your advocacy. I mean, this is where, to me, the fierceness of our love, the fierceness of like knowing what is true and beautiful and good. And what I really see, and like I felt this in myself, and I see this in the young girls in my life and in the young women, where like there's just, it's like just can see through the BS and feel what's good and true and beautiful and what's not.
Mhm.
And like that place that does, so easily get clouded over with all the conditioning and the distractions and the violence and the, all the grossness really of our dominant culture. But that, that fierce love and that, that knowing of actually what needs to happen for us to be well. And that to me is the, the domain within all beings of that divine mother,
Mhm.
um, who is, I feel like actually the untraumatized divine mother is radically fierce. The,
Absolutely.
the divine mother that has been beaten and forced into submission under threat to herself or her children, unfortunately, has allowed for harm to happen. But
Mhm.
that fierce mom, that fierce mother, and recognizing that that role of advocacy is just, really a way the divine feminine energies, I feel like, move within us, as
Mhm.
well as the divine masculine. But, now is the time for that divine feminine arising, because I completely agree. And I really appreciate how you, brought it to that kind of macro historical
Mhm.
perspective, and then into also, our current situation, which, to me, that's that place of the ceremonial life and that place of the shamanic or the earth honoring animistic
Mhm.
being, is something that is also so foundational because it's just brought so much beauty and healing.
Mhm.
And, as we're in this journey, I feel like, a big question in my heart is, how do you see, the most skillful means for, as women, bringing healing to these old imprints, these old wounds in our in our wombs, in our sexuality, in our being, be them from our own lives or ancestral or collective. Like, what is the most skillful means to doing that, so we're not kind of in this weird floundering place, which, also can happen with wounds. It can just feel like we just, like we don't make much traction. And
Mhm.
um yeah, that's just a question that came to
Well,
me.
I feel, one of the best ways is to find a skilled guide. And that's again why I feel like what you're doing here with this course is so beautiful and so perfect, because you're a skilled guide. And so women who find their way to your circle, to your hoop, it's a real privilege that they have this sacred, safe container to explore these wounds. So I would encourage women to find supportive groups of women who can explore this together. It's very difficult to explore this in a vacuum
Mhm.
because we're so multifaceted as women that having other sisters there to help us, it's like having a full moon, or having a full lunar cycle, like having 13 women with you. It's like having that perspective of each woman. They bring some medicine to the circle. And if there's a skilled guide, even better. Yet working with the moon and the phases of the moon is also very potent for any type of womb healing.
Mhm.
And I have found Mama Kia to be very generous,
Mhm.
that just spending time out in her, especially on the full moons, in meditation, that she's very generous with her information, with her healing, with her answers. And doing that with a group of women, even better.
Mhm. Mhm.
We used to gather when we all shared our moon times, and we would talk about our menstrual cycles. We'd talk about our bleeding. We'd talk about our children. We'd talk about our pregnancies, or the pregnancies that we did not go through with. We would talk about the mother. We would heal each other. So being in groups of women has always been our way, but we've lost that. And there's been a lot of competition between us as women. And that competition keeps us separated. Yet our togetherness is where our healing is. And so for me, the best way to address our womb wounds, or any really issue around our reproductive system or our divine feminine consciousness even, is to gather in groups of women and talk it through and support each other. Bring our drums, bring our rattles, our voices, bring our children.
Yeah.
They're beautiful healers, the children.
Totally. They pretty much have it figured out.
Figured
I figured it out too, but they got it. Totally.
I don't even think about it.
I know, they're just there.
Down in someone's lap that needs healing.
It's true. It's so true. And I mean, that's that place of, the simplicity of really just, how when we gather and we come together in love, what can happen. And, and that to me feels like part of, an interesting piece. And that has honestly kind of been, it's actually been a bit of like the deeper, one of the deeper calls to doing this is like that, especially when you speak of like gathering around our moon and our moon time and our bleeding and that piece, and how, there's been this overlay from what I will call patriarchy, although I recognize that it's in many different cultures and maybe that could in some way could be offensive, but of actually moon time being counter to ceremony, of our moon time being something that can contaminate the space. I've worked in, I've had the gift and honor of being in many different ceremonial ways, and just somehow like they've come into my life from the beautiful Andean traditions, which is where my heart and soul and our connection is, as well as in the ayahuasca traditions of mestizo lineage, not the Shipibo or the more indigenous tribes, as well as the Native American church ceremonies and different sweat lodge traditions, and Venezuelan shamanism with different plants. And what I've seen and what I experienced was such a big diversity of relationship to women's moon time, and the power of that being from anywhere from actually the people who I've worked with who've had the greatest aversion were actually female teachers. And in this like sweat lodge way, if any woman came to the sweat lodge site on their moon, they would have to burn the entire lodge down.
Whoa.
And then there was other iterations where a woman accidentally came after people were out of the sweat lodge, and she they said that she made everybody sick, and this place. And so I kind of just am bringing this in because this was honestly like, it comes up in our ceremonial practice every year. We have women who are coming who actually experience some sort of like some form of harm, albeit subtle to very, very, very great. There's been one situation where a woman actually was kicked out of the Maloka in the Amazon and then accosted and fondled by a man. And it was just like this whole thing for being on her moon. But every year I have anywhere from 5 to 10 women coming and sharing these stories around this this piece of the ceremonial world. And I would just kind of go off. I started to just like have a voice about it. But Darcy's like, do you really need to go off for an hour? And I'm like, yeah, I need to go off for an hour. Like I'm like, but like also recognizing there's probably a more constructive way I can work with that energy and a more articulate way, so that we can kind of get to the subtler levels, which is not shaming that way, but also recognizing how to, this overlay of our moon times being a potential source of contamination, and really like that in order to keep other people safe, we need to remove ourselves from the hoop. And so I'd be curious about your experience with that, your perspective. I know you've worked with ceremonies all over the world and traditions all over the world, and just so curious about it.
Well, the first thing I have to say is that, you know, Eve
Mhm.
was thought to be dirty because of her blood.
Yeah.
And that's a very deep wound right there.
Mhm.
And one that has carried on for a very, very, very long time. And I cannot speak to other indigenous cultures without doing an in-depth study of their ways and their reasons. Yet, of course, I can't help but feel that there is some of that influence
Mhm.
in all situations where women are considered to be unclean or unfit for ceremony, or even too powerful to be in a
Right.
ceremony.
Mhm.
What I can speak of is the Pachakuti Mesa tradition and the work that Oscar and I do together. And that is where all women are welcome.
Mhm.
All women at every stage of their life are welcome. Every stage of their moon cycle are welcome. All women identified people are welcome.
Mhm.
And we've worked with women's blood. We've used it on apachetas before to take that powerful, life-giving blood and put it into the Seki system of the planet so that all of the apachetas on the planet could be fed by women's moon blood. And we've done that before. And we've done that in front of indigenous elders who were afraid of the blood. And yet afterwards, they said they would go back to their tribes and they would change their ways. So that's what I can speak to, is that Oscar and I are all inclusive.
Yeah.
And we respect the power of the blood. Frequently, I used to use my blood in ceremony. One of my drums was painted with my blood. So of course, every time I bring that drum to ceremony and I'm making it sing, my blood is going out everywhere, the power of my blood.
Mhm.
And so I myself have used it in many different ways in ceremonies, both with and without Oscar.
Mhm.
So that's what I can speak to. There's also a book that I have read recently, and I believe it's called Shaman in the Woman's Body.
Okay.
And
Mhm.
that talks about a lot of different cultures and their response to moon blood. And so if a woman was really interested in finding out more about specific cultures and tribes, that book might be helpful for them.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I'll send you the title and the author
Beautiful.
afterwards, okay? So you can make that available for people.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting place of, yeah, being in so much sensitivity and honor, and
Mhm.
also recognizing, yeah, like, the places where I'm just remembering now, like, I believe it was about 5 years ago, and there was the largest protest
Mhm.
in human history in
Mhm.
India. And I believe there's something like 6 million people created a human chain,
Uh-huh.
and it was to, stand for women having the right to enter these temples on their moon time.
Mhm.
And that because they couldn't assure that women weren't on their moon time, that women weren't allowed into some of these different places.
Right.
And that to me was just such a huge and profound piece of like this awakening, and of the reclamation of our
Mhm.
sovereignty, one healing up one wound at a time. So our vessels kind of sealed up versus whatever we've just been surviving in. And that place of coming back to the medicine of our
Mhm.
bodies,
Mhm.
and that how I relate to, and my beliefs, my all those different pieces, how I relate to especially my moon blood,
Mhm.
reflects so much. And I say that from my experience of, like I calculated at one point that I have bled, like from the time I was 14 to 23, I bled as much as 7 women in their entire lives, like average women. And so my relationship to that blood and the levels of fear that would come up, I mean, just from bleeding that much is scary.
Yeah, of course.
But also, like, this deeper initiation into really seeing our relationship with both life and death, and that that continuum, and with how we can, by what I'm hearing is kind of by offering our moon blood consciously, that's a way that we can reclaim our power. But are there other ways that you feel, because I know there's a number of women who are, have different womb health issues that are in their moon pause, that are past and no longer in their bleeding time, and like how we can start to bring that reclamation of the medicine of our bodies, even this that has been, like you said, like so desecrated.
Reclaiming the medicine of our womb is an everyday occurrence. Every day we make a conscious choice to live our medicine. And there's a lot of noise in the world that wants to take our attention away from our medicine. And a lot of agencies that wants to, once again, keep us separated. Yet reclaiming our medicine is easier in a supportive environment where we don't think we're crazy some days because we have this intuitive hit, or because we actually feel something in our bodies that's giving us a message. And our medicine shows itself in many different ways. And even the choice of food we put in our body is medicine. So even that simple act of choosing what food we put in our body is choosing our medicine. And every time we come together and share with a woman and drum together, that's a way of reclaiming our medicine, sharing our medicine. Every time we help a mother in the store who can't get the door because she's holding 3 kids, that's a way of reclaiming our medicine. It's about conscious living in the world and living from our hearts. And for me, it's not a grandiose act. It's a conscious choice, everything I do every day. Am I going to be good medicine in the world, or am I not even going to make a difference? Am I not going to pay attention? Am I going to be just for myself? Every act has to be that decision for women. And it's time consuming.
Yeah.
It's every single day, it's every decision. And so at the same time, I would say we also have to retreat, and we have to heal ourselves. We have to give medicine to ourselves as well. So it's balancing that, reclaiming the medicine for ourselves and putting the medicine out in the world. And that's what feeds me, is both. And so for myself, reclaiming my medicine is an everyday conscious act with everything that I say, everything that I do, everything I put into my body, everything I offer other people.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And, I appreciate that, just bringing it back to, the choice.
It's choice.
How like, sovereignty doesn't exist when we're not conscious that we have the power to choose and that our choice matters. And
Oh,
that
it
to me is,
was.
really has been, the foundation of my healing journey. It's
Mhm.
kind of, I still remember the moment when felt like I was, like it's like looking back, it was like kind of the bottom. And it's, a longer story, but basically I had been working with a series of naturopaths and just getting worse and worse. And they were all trying so hard, but I was the most difficult case they'd ever found. And, at that point I knew that Western medicine was like, my system just couldn't handle the
Mhm.
pharmaceuticals.
Mhm.
So I worked through one doctor and then the next doctor. And then finally this young naturopathic, he was a young man and he just gotten out of naturopathy school. And
Mhm.
I came in, and I was telling him all the things, and he just looked at me and he was like, Robin, it sounds like you're really trying, but you're not giving it 100%. And
Mhm.
what you're healing is going to require 100%.
Uh-huh.
And I started crying, of course. But then, after that, I was just like, oh my God, thank you. Thank you so much
Mhm.
for, that reminder that I not only have the power to choose, but
Mhm.
actually it's only my responsibility. And that as long as I am abdicating the responsibility for my health to
Mhm.
an outside
Absolutely.
person, to, abdicating my happiness, just like you can fill in the blanks, and that abdication of power and that conditioning to look outside ourselves
Exactly.
for that, that medicine, just to really make it universal, to me was really that choice point. And I was like, I'm just gonna try, like, I'm not gonna even try, I'm just going to begin to do my best to take responsibility for everything that I'm experiencing, every thought,
Mhm.
every word, how I'm talking about my body, how I'm like, the stories I'm telling about it to other people, my identification. And yeah, it was like 110% of my consciousness needed to go there
Go there.
until it became less and less effortful. But that took years, to be honest. It was a couple-year journey where it was like, moment to moment. But
Well, we are relearning how to do this.
mhm,
I mean, it's insidious what has been taken from us, the choices that we have given away. Let's claim our responsibility for it. The
mhm,
choices we have given away every single day, one by one by one, it just gets easier and easier. Even in the more we get in social media, the more choices we give away. And so at that point, we're so accustomed to it that when it gets to, okay, now we're taking your reproductive rights away,
mhm.
so much has gone into leading up to that.
Yeah.
And then now we're talking something that is going to be really difficult to get back at
Mhm.
that level. And so every day we have to be conscious of the choices that we make and what we're giving, which choices we're giving away, because they're not being taken, we're giving them away.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
that brings me up to a difference between false power and true power.
Mhm,
And when we are in our true power, we're not going to give our choices away.
mhm,
False power is going to try to take them, but it's not true power. The true power comes here. We have to reclaim ourselves. We have to make our own choices. We have to stand in that true power.
mhm.
And it can be hard and challenging for us as women.
Totally.
And that's why I'm always advocating how important it is to have support groups of women that we can turn to, that we can talk to. And even men, I mean, I'm so grateful that I have a partner that, I can talk to about these things as well.
Mhm,
And that he's super in touch with, what I've been thinking about these terms, divine masculine and divine feminine, because I was having a
yeah.
conversation recently with some women and they were saying that they felt their behavior was like more masculine.
Mhm,
Yet I really feel like women are 360 degrees.
mm,
So what seems like, quote, masculine traits are really just another aspect of a woman. that she's the totality, and so are men. They're they're 360 degrees also. And so it feels like we create separation when we say divine masculine and divine feminine, when for myself, in fact, when we're aligned with our higher consciousness, we're both complete individually.
Mm-hmm.
And some are in male bodies and some are in female identified bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Yet ideally, when we are fully connected to our soul, we're complete as it is.
Absolutely. Yeah. I totally agree and feel like that, you know, that aspect of that divine union, you know, of all the different aspects of what we are, of the feminine and masculine, and our heavenly and earthly, you know, aspects, that higher self, and the human, and all the beauty within the human, and, you know, all the vastness within the higher self, or the heavenly aspect, and so on. And, you know,
what
that
a rich place to live from.
totally, that's where we want to be, right? Like, because then it's like, you know, I feel like for me, then there's just a knowing of the next step. And it's only when I'm in some sort of, you know, bifurcated illusion, which, I mean, all separation is illusion. Like, it's just not actually true. There's nuances and spectrums, but like, you know, it's like I'm in that place, and when I'm in that, then I experience incredible cognitive dissonance, and that dissonance, and then I get mentally confused, and, you know, all this, like, not knowing, you know, and that friction is something that I'm, you know, you know, seems like it's just amping up in the, you know, in our community, but also in the collective experience, because we're so conditioned to keep looking outside ourselves for the answer. And that, you know, and that when that's not actually what's happening within, then we get into these states and we're really easy to control.
Super.
We're in a state of dissonance.
Absolutely.
And we're, you know, and like in that place of where it's like, I'm just way too overwhelmed, and overwhelmed is probably like my biggest shadow state. Like for me, you know, just so overwhelmed, you do it for me. You know, you do it for me.
Exactly.
And that is, you know, that's that place of like, yeah, how do we, you know, realign to our core? And I know every woman who's in this container already is awake to that, because otherwise you just wouldn't be attracted to this work. However, you know, I think, and this is maybe like as we're kind of slowly in our wrapping up, is what I see is this place of, you know, the past, and our, like, how challenging it can actually be to bring healing to some of these wounds, because we've developed so much identification around them, or there's such a big, like for me, it was like my whole story of self for years was around my illness. And when I get people, like I'd sit down with somebody, we'd have a conversation, and then I would just hijack it and just start telling them everything that was wrong about my body. And I kept, like, I couldn't stop myself. And then I'd do that again. And it'd be like this pattern of realizing that actually one of the biggest impediments to my healing was how much I built an identity around that wound, and then the different pieces there. So, you know, this week we're exploring what I'm calling the labyrinth of the past. And I feel like this is so essential for women, because so much of our wounding imprints aren't actually just from this life.
Correct.
It's like, you know, thousands of years, hundreds of generations. And so would you be willing to like speak to your experience of, like, you know, in the Mesa tradition, there's the Campo Ganadero. There's that idea that the past is actually a field of power, and that we can, you know, we can work with that in a way that, like, I kind of feel in our culture, for the most part, if we even question past, which I don't know if that many people do, it's kind of like a static thing that happened, you know, versus this understanding of it being a field of power that we can perhaps reweave. And so I'm really curious about your perspective on that.
Rephrase that question.
Yeah, like, so about like working with the past and
Mhm.
wounds, and like the understanding that the pat like that with the campo ganadero, or the field
Mhm.
of power, how we can go in and like untangle the past, or even like recreate I've gone in and recreated the past in my
Mhm.
life before. But because we're working with so much of the trauma is actually in that realm of past, it's not necessarily moment to moment, although sometimes it is, but most of it's in the past.
Mhm. Wow, that's a big question, because that really gets into ancestral healing,
Mhm.
because we're talking about generations and generations. One way that I've worked with the past is to bring it into the present, with the understanding that past, present, and future are collapsed. It's all one. That is also another illusion, that there is a past, a present, and a future. So collapsing time is a way to work with those generational wounds.
Mhm.
And the way I know to collapse time is through shamanic journey, because we go into our dream time, we go into another realm, we go into another pacha.
Mhm.
And in that place, all possibilities are present.
Mhm.
And within those possibilities, we can begin to heal those wounds. So I feel like shamanic journey work is a very important component to the work you're doing with the women, and collapsing time.
Mhm.
So that when they then come out of the shamanic journey work, they bring that sense of collapsed time with them. And they understand that the healing was done in all realms. It was also done in the future.
Mhm.
And so that would be my best recommendation for healing those wounds of the past.
Awesome. Big
And
question.
and I
I
don't know
like
that
the
one
simplicity of
shamanic
the
journey will
answer.
do it, but that is a technique that I rely on. Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and thank you for, even for myself, like kind of actually simplifying it, because that's where all of that work has happened for me as well. And it's true. And it's, and afterwards I'm not the same, and I'm not orienting the same.
Mhm.
And, that place of, learning. And I think this is where it's a practice, which can be
Mhm.
kind of frustrating. You actually have to put work into it, but that's been my experience. It's like, nobody's going to wave the wand over my head for me. I've got to hold the focus. And that, as I've heard Don Oscar say, like that disciplined imaginative prowess,
Exactly.
and that place is so foundational. And
Foundational.
then to see like how, as that develops, that muscle develops, how, how we really can restructure and reform.
Mhm.
And I'm often feel like one of the reasons that shamanic ceremony, especially within, for me, the Pachakuti Mesa lineage is such a holistic, harmonized perspective and expression of medicine. And, one of the reasons I'm so honored and so grateful to be in this lineage with you, and then also in a place of being able to share this with others, is because of that deep rooted, expanded harmonization
Mhm.
of all these different elemental forces, and bringing that together in love, in
Mhm.
devotion, in reverence. And it's so clear, it's so transparent. And,
Mhm.
that's just what it is. Like the funny business that's part of the, in the shamanic realm is like that baser consciousness is
Yeah.
just not part of that harmony, because the medicine is devoted and in honor of Pachamama, Sophia, Gaia,
Mhm.
and
Exactly.
all of life. And it just brings it all together. And
Which
to
is where we started this dialogue.
totally,
Mhm.
yeah. And that's, really what my deepest prayer for, our work, my work, and our, this awakening, embodied, feminine power is that it's here to be in service to the, not just the 7 generations to come, but the many, many generations to come,
Mhm,
because
mhm.
we're at this critical point.
Absolutely.
And I honestly feel like it's either it's like waking up through while we're still in body, or the
Mhm.
big wake up and the healing of passing, but one way or the other, like, we're
Absolutely.
here. And I know that, I'm so honored to be in this journey with you, and to, even though we're not physically together, to be in, walk side by side as in our spiritual light bodies and souls, to be here and devoted to this service at this time.
Mhm.
And thank you so much for your love, your devotion, your wisdom, for sharing what you have today, and also for, like, bringing that, the goddess within, mystery school teachings out, and for encouraging, and being that advocate along in sacred partnership, but bringing that advocate for this being absolutely necessary, as we also remember these ancient, like,
Mhm.
the divine feminine is, it's the time that she's calling us home.
She and we need to call her home into us.
Yeah,
And
totally.
we need to live from that place of divine feminine consciousness in all those choices we were talking about.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you bring in all the little pieces, because that's just the reality of it. It's like, and I feel like now we're being asked to be integral.
Mhm.
Like, the age of the guru is not happening in the same way, where you can have like your persona and then your private life. But now it's like, we need to be these fully
Community is the
integrated.
guru. Exactly.
Yeah.
About
Mhm.
community, being
Totally.
in community, heartfelt community.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so
Thank
much for
you,
your
Robin. Thank you
time.
for your service and your work with the women. And I just love you beyond words.
Oh, I feel the same too. Thank you so much for your love, and we're sending it
And
back. We've
love
got
is
this,
our
like,
seed
this
into.
incredible, like, infinity loop of mutual, love and appreciation. And
Oh,